last solo cast that I put out into the podcast and YouTube network, I was talking about my story, and it was sort of part one. It was from conversion through early church planting, my move into business, the way the Lord led me and others into Kyrgyzstan to work there among the unreached and new believers. And since then, some of that work has spread all over the world, which has been an amazing thing to see. I want to pick it up from there and say, okay, what's happened since then? And the story from there sort of splits into two parts. And one is in my business career, I ended up going to work for one of my clients. I'd been a solopreneur most of my business life once I left the pastorate. A little short stint for a company in the early 90s, but most of it on my own, hiring others, building a company, having employees, all of that. And then in sort of the mid part of the Great Recession, 2007, 8, and 9, I made a conscious decision to go inside to work for one of my clients. And that was an amazing story in and of itself. We went from being a little, not a startup, but a roll-up of little companies into a slightly bigger company, a couple of $100 million in revenue in the staffing and employment industry. And by the time I stepped away and we sold the company in 2020 and 2021, we had grown into the largest light industrial staffing company in North America. We were at about $3.4 billion in revenue and 110,000 employees out working every single week. And the things I learned there about working inside a business, working, quote, for a boss, although the fellow who was my CEO, my boss, is an amazing guy, an amazing friend now, and learned a ton from him and the other members of the executive team that I had the privilege of working with. So that was a great journey, and it was a great place to learn about how to build a culture, how to have a purpose that is bigger than yourself, how to give our 3,000 staff employees a meaningful approach to the work they did with the 110,000 field associates, or temporary employees as we call them. And all of that was fantastic. Learned a ton about leadership, learned a lot about the financial side of business, learned a lot about equity partners. We had 5 different ones during my tenure. Most of them were pretty good. A couple of them were, one in particular was not so healthy, but all of that journey was still a learning experience. I learned to leverage my influence through a team. My own department, was probably 75 people in it, covered a lot of different areas in the company, and we were able to see God work in those different settings. And I'll come back in a minute and pick that up. But going back to the fork in the road, the other side of this, why did I go internal? Part of it was because of something that was said to me in Australia in 2011, to Australia on a speaking tour promoting my first Business as Mission book, which was called, ironically, Business as Mission. And I remember in the people down there, they loved it. The believers in Australia loved it, built some great friendships. Several of them remain in my best friend circle to this very day. One of whom is now almost my neighbor here in North Carolina. He moved over here, not to be with me, but he moved over here, and we see each other all the time. So it was a fantastic moment in my own walk with God, seeing another country, really spending a lot of time there, and seeing people open up and embrace the kingdom company, the kingdom impact of business concept. But something that was said to me in that very first conference in Sydney that I spoke at about starting kingdom businesses, being a business, an entrepreneur for the kingdom, all of those things. Somebody came to me during one of the breaks. He says, "Look, we love what you're saying, but for many of us, we're not bosses." That's their term, meaning founders or business owners. We're employees. We're not necessarily entrepreneurs. We work in jobs for companies, large and small. And I remember I was struck by that. I kind of filed it away and thought, all right, Lord, what do you do with this? Well, over a period of time, I began to realize that I needed to write something on that, how to do business as mission when you're not the boss. And so I figured, well, if I'm going to do that, I need to be internal with one of my customers. I need to be the guy doing it inside, so I could actually write from experience and not just theory. And so I had begun to talk with that company, my client, about working with them internally during the Great Recession. And actually, in 2009, I went internal with them and that's when I realized that I had this wonderful laboratory that God had provided to learn how to have kingdom impact, to do business's mission when you're not in control. Side note, of course, we're not in control anyway, but in this case in particular, I wanted to be sure that I was writing not just from a book, from a research perspective, but also from experience. And so as I began to step into this company, I can tell you after the next 12 years with that company, internally as an employee, kingdom impact was made. And not only by me. It wasn't just, this is not it isn't maybe Mike's story, but it's not the Mike story. God was at work in me and others, and we began to see kingdom impact happen. And so I ended up writing an entire book about it. What the Lord had taught me, what the Lord had shown me, what is a kingdom employee? What is actual real kingdom impact? What is business's mission impact? It's not just the saving of souls. It is that. There's a lot more as well. It's a lot broader. And so I began to see that. And I can tell you that over those 12 years that I was with that company, we saw people come to Christ. We saw people healed. We saw marriages healed. We saw relationships restored. We saw believers encouraged to be more bold and more open in their witness for Jesus. We saw all kinds of amazing things happen in that time. And I look back, it's like, this is clearly a God thing. And so what was happening there? Well, what was happening was there was a group of us that prayed together regularly. One guy, his name is Mike, another Mike, we have prayed together every Monday morning for 25 years. And that began when I was consulting with that company, and I interviewed him for that company and knew he was a believer and liked him instantly. We both felt very connected to each other, and we began to pray together. And then when I became an employee, he was already there, of course. And so we continued that. We prayed together literally every Monday morning and still do. This past Monday, we prayed together. We do it every single Monday morning, if at all possible. And so that was part of it, just seeing the answers to prayer, just because two pretty ordinary guys were willing to commit to time with God, the three of us meeting on Monday morning to talk over what was happening, me, Mike, and Jesus. And that, if I could give you an encouragement, if you're working inside a company and you want to see a difference made, you want to see kingdom impact, do something like that. It doesn't have to be Monday morning. It doesn't have to be a guy named Mike, but find a prayer partner or a prayer group and intercede, lift up the company to the Lord daily, weekly, monthly, whatever.